Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program and fellow CLNS member, Trevor Lane of Lakers Nation, to come on and talk about all of the kind of madness that has just come out this afternoon with the Los Angeles Lakers. I think it all kind of stems from the situations involving Julius Randle and Jordan Clarkson. We'll kind of get into the specific reporting there in a second. The second half of this podcast is going to be Cole Zwicker and I talking about Luka Doncic and about the Kentucky-Louisville game. So if you're interested in that, maybe fast forward through the Lakers stuff if you're sick of hearing about the Lakers, given how all-encompassing they are. But they're all-encompassing for a reason, because they're very interesting this year. This podcast is going to be presented by MyBookie and DraftKings. So, Trevor, let's just kind of get started. But before then, how's it going, buddy?
It's going, man. I mean, I think that, made it through Christmas, first of all, and that all went well. Now we're heading towards New Year's, and I think that you hit the nail on the head when you said that this is Lakers madness, because I don't think there's a better way to describe it. This is absolute insanity going on right now.
Yeah, it's a really weird situation within the front office, I think is the best way to put it. And let's just kind of start with what's going on. So earlier today, the reason that I had Trevor on the podcast was just to kind of talk about the Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle rumors, right? So Tanya Ganguly of the LA Times came out, and I guess that she was on Spectrum Sports Network and said something along the lines of the Lakers would like to trade Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle. And this isn't breaking news. If they got an offer for those guys, we know that they would take it if they could find the right one. This one sounded a little bit more, did it sound desperate to you almost?
Yeah, I mean, she said that the Lakers would love to trade Julius Randle and Jordan, it's like a well-known thing that they would really like to see those guys go out the door, which was a little bit strange because, I mean, there was a report just the other day, and I'm trying to remember who it was from, but it was just the other day, and they said that, yeah, the Lakers know they'd like to move Jordan Clarkson, but they may not do it until the summer,
right?
Because they want to keep winning games right now, and it made it seem like they weren't all that desperate to make a move. And then the way she phrased this makes it sound like they're feeling like, oh my gosh, we have to get this done right now.
Yeah, and the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, right? Like they're probably trying to reach out and figure out what's going on, do their due diligence, so to speak, on these guys, and eventually by the deadline, like maybe they would find a home, whereas this seemed a bit more imminent in terms of the language used. And then it comes out via Bill Oram is he the OC Register?
Yes, he is. Southern California News Group, which controls the OC Register and a few other properties. But yeah.
Right. So it says the Lakers had a team meeting yesterday where the players aired grievances about what's happening on the court and, according to Brandon Ingram, the business of the organization. And to me, what that sounds like is that the players are pretty pissed about the way that these situations are being handled, that they're being discussed so publicly, that the front office, in particular Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka, aren't really doing anything to quell these rumors, and they aren't really doing anything to create a sense of, camaraderie among the team. You know what I mean? Any time that you have a situation where two players, and really it's not even just two players, but in particular, I think we could talk about Jordan Clarkson and Julius Randle, but I think that realistically everyone outside Alonzo is probably up for grabs on the roster if the right situation came along. The problem is that it creates a sense of a lack of togetherness, really. And I can imagine that it would be incredibly difficult for a team to operate under those circumstances.
Absolutely, especially a young team.
Right.
I mean, these are young guys that don't have a lot of experience in the NBA. And as we inch closer to the trade deadline, here's my thing. This is going to get worse.
Yeah.
This isn't going to get better. Like, the rumors are going to pick up as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline, and how they handle it is going to be a lot of what we see on the floor. That's going to determine wins and losses and things, is how these guys handle the trade rumors. Do they get all wrapped up in it and they worry all the time about whether or not they're being moved, or are they able to just get past it? Because it's just it's part of the NBA. For someone who covers the NBA, the trade deadline is fun. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on. There's exciting things happening and everything. For a player, it's a completely different experience. It's unsettling. It's unnerving. I mean, you don't know if you're going to be shipped off to a different city at any time. And Magic Johnson and Rob Pelinka have not been very bashful about saying that they're going to have enough cap space for 2 max players. As of right now, they don't. They have enough cap space for 1, but not 2. So when they're making comments as though they already have that cap space, that is going to make the players start looking around and think, damn, who's not going to be here then? Yeah. Who has to get moved in order to free up that space? Because that has to happen. I mean, the players are smart. The players understand what's going on, and they know that the team cannot have enough cap space for 2 players with everyone that's on the team now still around.
Yeah, so I kind of contrast this with the early Philadelphia rebuild, right? Like in 2013, Sam Hinkie takes over. He hires Brett Brown. And one of the first things that Sam Hinkie wanted to do, even beyond, just accumulate assets, right, was he wanted to create an organizational culture. And you talk to people who have spoken with him, he went above and beyond in terms of trying to find a way to, accommodate all of these players who, maybe they're going to be pieces long term, maybe they're not. Maybe they're going to be on the organization for years to come, like Hollis Thompson ended up just being a flyer that was taken that didn't work out. Robert Covington ends up being a flyer that was taken that does work out, and he's going to be on the team for the next 5 years. But one of the establishing features of what he wanted to do was create a culture where when new people came in, they actually wanted to be there. Even though the team was losing, they found a way to kind of figure out just how to treat people well. And, I think that the best way to exemplify that publicly is by looking at Brett Brown, right? Brett Brown, he's going into his 5th year as the Philadelphia 76ers coach, despite winning just 47 games, not 37, in his first 3 years. No other organization would have allowed him to continue on at that pace. Like, no one else would have decided, hey, this is fine. We're just trying to, build the right culture. We think we have the right guy. So many other organizations were pulling the trigger and just deciding to, fire coaches. It's not right. We're losing games. We're actually kind of regressing because they lost a increasing number of games from 2013, 2014 to 2015, 2016. But instead they realized they had the right guy and they continued to, grow and mature and foster that situation. And that was their goal for the organization over the course of those 3 years. With the Lakers, I don't feel like there's any of that going on. I don't feel like there's any sort of culture building happening. And whenever you're a young player trying to adjust to the NBA, adjusting and getting the right culture from a young age is so incredibly valuable to your development process. And I just wonder if this is the proper way to go about things, even if you're deciding, okay, we're going to go out, we're going to be major players in free agency, we're going to get 2 max guys next summer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that conversation is going to be had regardless of whether Magic and Pelinka, regardless of what they're saying. I think reporters, yourself, myself, others are going to be saying, hey, the Lakers are going to have enough cap space for 2 max free agents. They're going to get there by moving this guy, because that's our jobs. So that's going to be out there anyway. But I think it doesn't help. I think you're right that it doesn't help when you've got the guys in charge saying that or speaking as though they're going to have that space available, because it kind of puts a target on everyone's back where they're going to start looking around and saying, hey, who's going to get moved? Who's going to be the one to get traded? And the meeting that we talked about with that Bill Orm reported on, that the team had this big kind of air it out meeting, like that in and of itself isn't necessarily an odd thing. I mean, that happens right, where you have the players only meetings and all that kind of stuff, where especially for a team that's lost 7 of their last 8 games, right? So them getting together and trying to work through their problems is perfectly normal.
It's good even, I would say.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But the fact that part of the meeting, and I don't know exactly what was said at the meeting just yet, we haven't heard, but that at least a portion of it was dedicated to what's going on within the organization. That's where there's a little bit of a concern there. And so you got to worry about, what impact is this having on the players themselves, and are they feeling like this is going to be their long-term home? The nature of the NBA is that some guys are not going to stay long-term with a franchise. I mean, most players don't stay their entire career with one team, but in particular, you want guys like Lonzo and Ingram and Kyle Kuzma and all these other young guys, you want them to feel like they are part of something rather than they're just a chip that's going to be moved at the drop of a hat.
Right, and I think that that's where I kind of draw the comparison to Hinkie, right? Is that at the end of the day, that's the way that, the Sixers organization publicly was portrayed, right? That everyone's an asset. And I think that Sam Hinkie would probably agree with that to an extent, that he saw players as assets, and he said many things publicly that would kind of corroborate that, but at the end of the day he still found a way to treat them like people. And I just wonder if that's happening within the organization with the Lakers. And the best way to kind of show that to me is the way that they've kind of strung along Julius Randle this year, right? Like, Julius has unquestionably made a leap as a basketball player. I don't think there's any doubt about that. He has very clearly become a better, bigger piece of what this organization is. He is a better defensive player this year, who, Luke Walton himself said on Friday morning, we feel comfortable with him guarding everybody. He can switch. He can, he can rebound. He can just basically cover in all of our defensive coverages. And if that's the case, you have to wonder what's going on there, because with Randle, he's been so effective offensively. He's shooting well over 50% from the field. He has added at least the semblance of a three-point shot. He is dynamic in terms of the way he can handle the ball. He has been arguably the Lakers' most productive. He's brought the best maybe combination of productivity and efficiency on the Lakers this year, is maybe the best way to put it offensively. So I just look at that situation and I'm just like, what's going on there? Like, I get that, over the course of the first few years that Randle, maybe kind of brought some people along the wrong way because there were questions about how hard he was working, but that seemed to change this summer, and it seems to have shown in his play, and to not reward him for it seems odd to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you summed that up very, very nicely. I mean, Randle did get in incredible shape. I think you and I have talked about this before, that he looked like an MMA fighter or something like that. I mean, he is in just absolutely insane shape. He's been asked to change his role. He's not the starting power forward anymore. Now he's the backup center, and he's doing phenomenally at it. I mean, he's suddenly become a decent rim protector, which he wasn't before. He's switching on everything. I was mentioning this on Twitter the other day. There was one play, I believe it was in their last game against the Grizzlies, where he switched on to 3 or 4 different guys in one possession and did it seamlessly and did a good job on all of them, whether it was a guard, a big, whatever. So he's become a very versatile defender, and yet his minutes are just not there. I mean, his minutes are lower than they were last season.
Yeah, and he's at 22 minutes a night right now, by the way.
Yeah, and for a guy that's going to be a restricted free agent, he's got millions of dollars on the line. This has got to be extremely frustrating for him. And I'll say something else. Luke's comments today were a little bit surprising. I was expecting the reason to be, matchups are the issue, right? I was expecting it to be, we don't want to throw Randle, who's 6'9" and doesn't have super long arms or anything like that. We don't want to have him guarding some of the behemoth centers that are out there. We don't want him guarding DeMarcus Cousins. We don't want him guarding DeAndre Jordan, guys like that. Like, that would make sense. Okay, matchup specific. Yeah, maybe you don't want Randle to be playing defense in that situation. Okay, fine, if that's the reason for the lack of minutes. But the way Walton describes is that he's essentially using minutes as a carrot to motivate Julius Randle and to get him to play at a certain level, when it seems like he's been playing at that level. He's certainly made improvements from what we've seen in the past. So I just feel like there's a disconnect here, and it's still a little bit questionable of exactly what's happening, what's going on behind the scenes that is causing the Lakers to not give minutes to Julius Randle. And I'll tell you, I'm almost getting like a D'Angelo Russell-esque feel right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you see that too?
Yeah, it seems like he has worn out his welcome to the organization almost, despite making a leap as a player, which is weird because, you can make the argument, I think, that D'Angelo Russell didn't really make the leap as a Laker, right? I would disagree with that. I think he showed pretty substantial improvement from year 1 to year 2, particularly when they started playing him a little bit more off the ball. But I think that we can agree that he didn't become what everyone was expecting him to be within his first 2 years. With Randle, I think that it's becoming pretty clear that he is becoming that player. He's becoming exactly what people expected, and he just turned 23 years old. This is not a guy that has been unimpressive so far this year. I would get it if you were like, okay, we just need to push him a little bit more. He needs to show more defensively. I mean, on-off numbers aren't everything, but this team's 3.5 points better offensively, and they're 1.5 better defensively when Randle's on the floor. And he's played with a ton of different lineups to where, that number and metric doesn't necessarily get super noisy, right? Like sometimes it's very dependent on other players that a specific player is playing with. Like with Andre Robertson's numbers with Oklahoma City, you have to worry about the fact that he plays 90% of his minutes essentially with Russell Westbrook and Paul George. With Randle, he's been moved around in so many different roles and in so many different lineups that I think that number is actually pretty true. They're just a lot better when Julius Randle's on the floor.
Yeah, there's no debate about that. I mean, Julius Randle has been the best center on the Lakers roster. All of their top five-man rotations in terms of net rating, the best ones include Julius Randle at center. And so here's my question. If Randle is finding success at the center position, and you're in a good situation with him as far as him being a restricted free agent, there's not a whole lot of cap space out there this summer. They've got Randle in a kind of a bind here where they can keep him probably at a fairly cheap number, assuming some team out there doesn't just toss a huge offer his way. They're in really good shape to make him a long-term piece if they want to. So with Brook Lopez out right now, why are we not finding out whether or not Randle can have that kind of success as a starting center?
Yeah, I agree. That would make total sense to me. But it doesn't seem like the Lakers organization is really all that interested in finding it out. And that is fascinating to me on a number of levels. But the weirdest one, I think, is that even if you have decided to trade him, this presents the perfect opportunity to help raise his value. Brook Lopez is out right now. You can make the case that, we're just going to play Julius with the starters. We're going to let him pump up his numbers and we're going to move him on. But that's not what's happening. It's like they've pigeonholed him into this backup center role when it doesn't really make sense to pigeonhole someone into any role, right?
Right. Yeah. It seems like they are kind of shooting themselves in the foot because you can't be increasing his trade value right now. His minutes have gone down since Brook Lopez went out. Which is mind-boggling. I mean, I thought for sure that Randle was going to get a bunch more minutes because Brook Lopez is out of there, but instead those minutes have gone to Andrew Bogut, and we've seen Kyle Kuzma playing like 40 minutes a night at power forward, and then Larry Nance Jr. picking up some minutes at center as well. So Randle's barely being used. This whole situation feels like there has to be something else going on here. There must be something else that happened or that Luke Walton is seeing in practices or some other dynamic here that we're missing, because otherwise it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder if Walton is kind of, I don't even know if it's like playing favorites, but like you would hear rumors about like, he was just done with D'Angelo Russell and just kind of was like, whatever, we're not going to deal with him anymore. You have to wonder if something like that's kind of coming along here a little bit, that he wants guys that play a very specific way, and that I guess that maybe Randle isn't that kind of guy. And I think that another player that's worth bringing up here is Jordan Clarkson, as we mentioned at the top. This was a contract that I think you could make the case was underwater coming into the season, like that people just flat out wouldn't want Jordan Clarkson. He wasn't quite showing as much value as he did in his first 2 years, whenever he averages almost 16 points a game in that second year and looks like a valuable piece going forward, even as a trade chip. He signs a contract in that wild, insane summer that actually looked pretty reasonable at the time, with only making, I believe, $12 million a year.
Yep.
And it doesn't really raise all that extensively. Like, he has the full raises, but at most it's going to be $13.5 million in 2019-2020. So for me, I don't understand what they're doing with Clarkson either, because he's been very effective in his minutes on the floor. He's averaging his most points per 36 minutes. He's averaging 22.4 points per 36 minutes. He's averaging more assists than he ever has per 36 minutes, if I remember correctly on that one. So, like, it's just bizarre to me. I do understand that he can get a little bit wild, but, even as a backup point guard that you can occasionally play with Lonzo, who does need a guy out there who can kind of handle the ball with him, I don't understand what they're doing there either.
Well, I mean, I kind of get it in a sense. Like, if you're looking at two guys, you're looking at Randle and you're looking at Clarkson. And if things were all going well with Randle and everything was sunshine and roses and all that, then I can totally understand the Clarkson angle, because really, if you're looking at those two players, which one is easier to replace? I would argue that Clarkson is. If you have to move, you have to move one of them in order to free up cap space for LeBron. I mean, if you're bringing in LeBron James and Paul George, or DeMarcus Cousins and Paul George, or whatever combination, and if the cost is Jordan Clarkson, then I totally get it. I don't know, though, that you move him at the trade deadline. I think ideally the Lakers would wait to move him until the summer, because Clarkson does help them win games this season, and that's something that they're interested in doing. They don't have their draft pick to tank for or anything like that, so you might as well win as many games right now as you can. So unless you get a great offer for Jordan Clarkson, then I would say you hang on to him and then you try to move him in the summer if you have to. I mean, if you strike out in free agency, then you just keep him. Otherwise, you're moving him for nothing, really. So it kind of depends on what the return is here. But I'll tell you, when we look at the trade market, you're looking at two different things with Jordan Clarkson and with Julius Randle, because with Clarkson, you're trying to get an expiring contract and some sort of an asset. You can't take on a salary that goes for 2 years, and it's the same way with Randle. But you have to try to find someone who expires right now. So that's part of the value that you're getting back, is you're getting back an ending contract in whatever Clarkson trade that they can come up with. And if they can add a pick into that or whatever, fine. It all depends on who the player is and the team is, and there's all kinds of variables in there. With Randle, if the Lakers have decided that it's time to move him, his contract is already expiring. So they're just trying to extract whatever value out of him they can, but their trade market is so limited because they can only really take back another expiring contract. So are you going to be able to find a team that's willing to give up a first for half a season of Randle? I don't know. And then are you going to be able to find a team that has that expiring contract to send back for him as well, that they don't value, or a player on an expiring contract that the Lakers like better than Randle, like we saw rumors about Nerlens Noel? So it's such a weird time to be trying to trade these guys, because what they can take back is so incredibly limited. It's not like they can just put them out there and get anything from any team and field all these offers, because they have sort of handcuffed themselves by wanting to have cap space this summer.
Yeah, like what the Lakers would basically have to do in a circumstance like this is they would have to find a trade partner for Julius Randle in particular, we'll start with, that would value his restricted free agency rights, and that would value the ability to, that would first trust in his talent level and then value the ability to sign him to a long-term contract. And I actually think those are valuable. I also don't think those rights are underwater. I've seen some speculation that people are like, no, we don't want to have to pay him this summer. I mean, there are only like 6 or 7 teams that are going to have max cap space this summer. There are teams that are going to have cap space, but at the end of the day, like, I don't know that Julius Randle's contract gets all that wild. Like, if he's making more than $13 million next year, I'd be pretty surprised. And to be honest, like, I don't have a problem paying that for him, given what he's shown in terms of value and in terms of youth. You're paying for his prime. It's not like some of these older unrestricted free agents where you wouldn't be paying for their prime. You'd be paying for older years. With Randle, you'd be paying for his, 23 to 27-year-old years. I'm pretty okay with that, to be honest. Like, I would be understanding of paying that, maybe $12, $13 million a year to do that, especially given the value he's shown in the modern NBA with his ability to grab and go, his skill set in terms of switching in ball screen situations. The fact that he can make plays for others. He's good in handoff situations. He keeps improving as a defender at the rim, even though I don't think he's ever going to be elite in that regard. Having a guy like him who can, you can realistically play him at the end of games if you're a contender, and I think that's a very rare commodity for NBA teams.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, if Randle was getting that kind of a deal, that's a pretty good value. I mean, and I don't even know that he'll get that. There's so few teams out there that have cap space, that need a guy like Randle, and that want to spend that money on a restricted free agent. There are a lot of teams that just don't like tying up their money in restricted free agency. So, right. I mean, you've got all those factors at play. I mean, it's definitely going to be a tough market for Randle this summer. So if you have those rights, you are in the driver's seat. So he may not even get that. I mean, it kind of depends on how all the variables break. But, yeah, I mean, this when you're looking at teams that are going to value Randle, it's almost like you have to look at it as teams that are already capped out may value trading for him right now more than any other team would, because
Agreed.
they're not going to have the ability to sign him in the summer. And by trading for him now, then you're getting his bird rights, and then you can go over the cap to sign him. So you got to look at teams that actually don't have cap space as possible trade destinations for Randle.
Is there a team out there that you're looking at as a potential fit for Julius Randle right now?
I look at teams, basically any team that's got some shooting in the power forward and the center position, because Randle is not a great outside shooter. Mm-hmm. I think about this is kind of scary. I think about partnering up Randle with Kristaps Porzingis in New York.
I like that a lot.
I don't know what they would send back, but I mean, that would be a hell of a combination.
Yeah, no, I like that one a lot. I like the idea of him in Toronto as well. To me, he kind of fits their timeline in a little bit of a manner. I think he can play right now. I would like the idea of pairing him with a Serge Ibaka, even though, they already have a lot of big guys. Like, if you're going to consider him just a center at this stage, they have Jakob Poeltl, they have Bebe Nogueira. Like, they have guys, but I think Randle's just better than they are. Like, I would rather just take a chance on Randle if you're paying, to send him away and take a shot on maybe one or two of their young guys going forward. I'm trying to think of a couple others. Oklahoma City has been raised to me as a potential one. I don't really know how to feel about that, to be honest. Like, I'm not entirely sure how he helps them, unless you think that he's going to step into a role that they're trying to find a final, fifth guy that can close lineups for them, along with their big four, Carmelo Anthony, Steven Adams, Paul George, and Russell Westbrook. Unless you think Randle can close with those guys, I'm pretty skeptical of that one.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about the fit with Randle and Steven Adams together on the floor. I'd worry about the spacing problems when you've got that combo.
Yeah, I mean, I look at Washington as a team that could be a fit there. I mean, they're going to have a first-round pick to give up. They always do, it seems like, every year at the deadline. I would look at, I think that you can get where you need to in terms of salary by, just adding Tim Frazier and, a couple of their minimum deals in a first-round pick. So I look at that as an interesting fit because
what about New Orleans?
Yeah, New Orleans is interesting. I mean, if they want a third big, but again, if I'm them, I'm only trading for Julius Randle if I'm trading DeMarcus Cousins, right?
Right. Yeah, that's the issue.
Right. Like, if Julius Randle is going back as part of a package with Jordan Clarkson and with something else for DeMarcus Cousins, then sure, okay. I don't know that I would do that if I'm New Orleans, though. Like, I don't know that. Like, if I'm doing that, that's a total rebuild move, and I'm considering moving Anthony Davis at the end of the day there,
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I don't know that outside of Cousins, New Orleans doesn't really have much to send back. I'm just thinking in terms of the fit, you could have a three-headed monster a Kentucky three-headed monster, I guess, of Davis and Cousins and Randle, and have those three. Because, I mean, then Randle's always sharing the floor with a guy that can shoot a bit from the outside and do a little bit of defending and all that. So that was just one that popped into my head as well. But
yeah, Milwaukee is super interesting to me if they could find a way to do it, because they have the length to insulate Randle, but I don't really I don't think they have the salary matching to do it on expiring deals. And they traded their first round pick already for Eric Bledsoe in all likelihood.
Do you think Randle nets a first from somebody?
I mean, it depends on how they leverage him the rest of the way. Like, I think that if I was running a team and say I'm running the Wizards and the Lakers at the deadline tell me, okay, we're just not going to move Julius unless you give us a first-round pick, I'd probably call their bluff the first time they said it. But, I mean, after that, if it got down to it and we missed out on a couple of other targets, I might. Like, I don't think it's out of the question to get a late first-round pick for him. Like, put it this way, Lou Williams got a late first-round pick last year, and to me, Julius Randle has more value due to the fact that you can keep him longer term than you can keep Lou Williams. Yeah,
I'd agree with that, definitely. I think there might be some teams that are concerned about having to pay him, but if you're one of those capped out teams and you feel like Randle is that piece that's going to give you that edge heading into the playoffs, then yeah, I could see them making the move.
I mean, maybe one interesting one is Portland. If Portland decided they could play him with Yusuf Nurkic, You could trade Ed Davis's expiring deal and like their potentially late first round pick.
Yeah. Yep. That'd be a good one.
Like that actually makes a little bit of sense to me, but they would have to really buy into Randle. And I think actually he fits really, really well with what they do on offense. He's so good in handoff plays. He's a great diver to the basket. He can grab and go, and I think that ability could really help them with the way that Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum can spot up as shooters on the floor. So I actually like that. It's kind of what they were trying to do with Evan Turner almost, except more of a grab and go guy on the break, not a guy who can run half court offense almost.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. I could see having Randle out there is just giving them Randle isn't a great shot creator, but he can do it a little bit, and he can create for teammates. His assists are down a little bit this season, but we've seen it in the past that when he grabs and goes, he can create shots for other people just by drawing the entire defense into the paint because he's just bull in a china shop charging down the floor.
Yeah.
So if you add that aspect to the Portland offense, and then he's got shooters around him on the perimeter, I could definitely see that working.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense to me. And then, just while we're here, let's kind of create a couple of fake ones for Clarkson too. The one that was interesting to me was if Oklahoma City could find a way to get involved for Clarkson, just because I've not been a huge fan of what I've seen from Ray Felton. He's been better in Oklahoma City than what he has been in the past, but you do occasionally see them like running Alex Abrinas as like a backup point guard, which is weird to me. I would consider that if I was them. I don't think that contract's underwater anymore. I think it's actually,
and there's
okay.
There's some people out there that still think that it is. We've seen those comments online that Clarkson contract is terrible, and not from Lakers fans, of course, but yeah, you do see that a little bit out there. But I think his play this season has been strong enough to where you wouldn't look at him as like a negative value. I don't think the Lakers are going to have to give up something in order to move his contract or anything like that.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there. I mean, I'm still just trying to randomly find targets, but it's hard. I was thinking about Denver maybe, but his money is super hard to match is the issue.
That's the issue, and match with an expiring makes it difficult. I look at Washington, and I think, man, that could be a good fit there. I mean, it'll bring things full circle, I guess, because the Lakers got the pick to select Clarkson from Washington. But I see them as a potentially good fit, but they don't have the expirings that the Lakers would need, or at least the movable expirings to actually make something work. They'd have to find some other team, and it just gets complicated so fast when you can really only take back expiring deals.
Well, you know who is an interesting one? Indiana could be an interesting one if they decide they really want to make a playoff push. You could decide to just trade along Bogdanovic's, he has a small guarantee next year. I think it's like $2.5 million or so, but it's $1.5 million looking at the numbers now. Or you could decide Darren Collison. I'm sorry. Good Lord. He's at $2 million guaranteed next year. That helps the Lakers by a factor of $10 million, and that gives them the salary cap relief that they need to go out and get the 2 max deals. So if you're the Pacers and you think that Jordan Clarkson can be a valuable piece for you going forward for the next 2 years as well, even though you do have Corey Joseph, obviously, and you do have Collison and Bogdanovich who can run offense, and you have to wonder about the fit next to Victor Oladipo. You just can't. To me, you almost can't have enough guys who are 6'5" and can create offense under long-term deals. Especially whenever he can do it shooting 35% from three, which he has done this year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a valuable piece to have. And here's another one that I've seen pop up quite a bit. Maybe not so much now that they're winning, or maybe more now that they're winning. But I look at Chicago and I look at that expiring contract of Nikola Mirotic. What do you think about that fit there? I
mean, they have 1 billion lead ball handlers, and it seems like Chris Dunn is really coming along now. I don't know that I would mess with that, but that's the kind of deal you need to get that deal home. You need the kind of contract that says, okay, it's probably a non-guarantee the next year, or it's a total expiring contract. I mean, a funny one would be the Clippers, for the Lou Williams deal. That would just be,
oh man,
a little bit funny to me, just given, how the Lakers dealt him last year. But if you could, add the Lou Williams deal to, maybe Willie Reed and Bryce Johnson, given that Bryce is now just totally useless to the Clippers long term because they gave him they declined his option.
Right.
Maybe that's the kind of deal that makes a little bit of sense. That gets you to like $10 million in terms of salary matching. I think that's pretty close to what you need to get to Clarkson.
That would be like the most awkward trade ever. I mean, Lou Williams wasn't thrilled when he got moved to Houston, and then he got moved all the way back to the Clippers. He definitely wasn't happy when he got moved back to LA from Houston after just getting settled in Houston. So I would just be like if that went down, I would run to every social media account that Lou Williams has just to see the reaction to winding up back with the Lakers after everything.
Well, I mean, what the Lakers could do in that case, though, is they could just buy him out at that stage.
Yeah.
Like that would be
definitely.
That'd be an easy scenario to me. Just buy out Lou and, he can go play for another contender and be happy.
Sure. Yeah, if he definitely didn't want to be there. I mean, he's been actually absolutely phenomenal this season. He's been very, very good for the Clippers. But yeah, if they feel like Clarkson is the piece they want moving forward because they'd have a little bit more team control there and everything, right, then yeah, I could see something like that working for them. There's a little bit of duplication there with what Austin Rivers does, I guess.
Right.
But but still, like you said, you can't have too many of those guys.
Right, and at the end of the day here, a lot of it's going to depend on what DeAndre Jordan wants to do because, with DeAndre, they have this option that he's almost certainly going to decline to go out and get what could be his last big contract. Does he want to stay? Does he decide he wants to play elsewhere for the rest of his career? I don't know, but if he decides he wants to play elsewhere, they actually have a decent amount of cap space that they could go out and try and use. So, I mean, maybe they don't want to do something like that, but a lot of it depends, too, on, what ends up happening with Austin Rivers' option. I would imagine he probably opts into that at 12.6. Milos Teodosic is another one. He's at 6.3 with an option. I don't know what the hell he's going to do with that option yet. I think it's going to depend a lot on the way he finishes his season. Mm-hmm. And then Wes Johnson, at 6.1, I would think he probably opts into that move as well. So it's a funky deal with the Clippers. They're in a weird spot, but if they think that they can get an actual piece that could help them long term, I think that would make sense.
Well, and here's the thing with all this. I mean, the bottom line is that there's going to be teams out there that can use both Randle and Clarkson, but what does the Lakers' leverage look like at this point with them saying, oh, yeah, we're definitely going to have two max slots, which they don't already. They have to make a move in order to do that. And now you've got a report coming out saying they would love to move these guys. I mean, that to me, if I'm another GM, I'm contacting the Lakers and I'm throwing out lowball offers because sounds like they're getting desperate and it's going to be a fire sale here. So I don't know how this is all going to play out.
For sure. I'm right there with you. This is a weird situation. Trevor, thanks for coming on, man. Tell the people where they can find your work.
Sure. Well, you can find me at LakersNation.com. Find all my work there. Also, I host the Lakers Nation podcast as well as the Lakers Nation news feed, which is our quick hitter podcast where we go over breaking news and all that sort of stuff. And, of course, you can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane. And thanks a lot for having me on, Sam. This was a lot of fun in a crazy day. Yeah, it's been a weird day in Lakers land. Please stay tuned here. We're going to have Cole Zwicker come on for the back half of this podcast. It's going to be about 30 to 25 minutes or so on Kentucky-Louisville and on Luka Doncic's dominance over in Europe. So stay tuned. Before we get into talking to Cole about some NBA draft stuff, let's go on ahead and pay some bills here. Listen up, Hoops fans. Basketball season is back, and now that your favorite hardwood heroes have returned to action, it's time for you to put your fantasy knowledge to the test to win huge cash prizes every night playing one-day fantasy basketball at DraftKings.com. At DraftKings, there are so many ways to play. Choose from public contests with huge cash prizes or private contests where you can compete against your friends. They've even got beginner and casual contests where you can play against people of a similar skill level. The best part is that you get to draft a new team every day, and drafting a new team is the best part of fantasy sports. The only thing better is winning cash doing it. Huge cash prizes and bragging rights await only at DraftKings.com. Use the promo code CLNS at DraftKings.com to play free with your first deposit for your share of $10,000 in total prizes tonight. Don't wait. Use the code CLNS at DraftKings.com now to choose your lineup, and you can seriously cash in tonight. That's code CLNS at DraftKings.com. The game inside the game. Our second sponsor today is MyBookie. Holiday cash, you need it, and I know where you can get it. MyBookie is the place to score serious cash on your sports predictions.
the holidays have come and gone, but that doesn't matter. There are still sports for you to put some money on every single day. You can score big on football, basketball, and hockey games. Man up and play like the pros on game day. You can play the money line, side, or total. MyBookie is your hookup for all your betting needs and offers huge fast payouts when you win. Where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on. And if you want to make money betting the games, you got to go to mybookie.ag. They're the only site that I would recommend. I trust them, but you don't have to take my word for it. Check them out for yourself. They have odds on every matchup and a mobile site that makes wagering on your smartphone a breeze. Join now and MyBookie will match your deposit with up to a 50% bonus. Use the code GAMETHEORY to activate that offer. That's GAMETHEORY. Visit mybookie.ag today. You play, you win, you get paid. Cole, how's it going, buddy?
It's going, man. A little bit of a slow Friday. A weird early game between Louisville and Kentucky, so that was kind of an interesting throw-in at the last second that I realized last night was occurring, so it's going well. How about yourself?
Yeah, it was funny. I told you last night, I don't know, we'll just, we'll go off in the new year. We'll start podcasting again then. The numbers, it's the holiday season, it's not like people are clamoring for podcasts every single day whenever you have family around, you have all of these events to go to. But, the Lakers thing happened, and I figured that would be a really interesting jumping point. Plus, this Louisville-Kentucky game happens, and that was a bizarre game, man. The first half was hideous, and then, in the last 25 or so minutes of that game, Kentucky just poured it on. That Louisville team looked bad to me right now.
Oh, yeah. The second half, the entire game for Louisville is brutal. They just don't have the floor spacing. Just a quick question for you. If I set the over-under at drafted Louisville prospects at 0.5, would you take the over or the under?
I would take over, I think.
Okay.
Hey, that's the number, though, I think. People always ask me about Adele. I like him as a college player. I think he's useful, but he can't shoot, and he kind of, doesn't have the supreme explosiveness to get into the lane consistently. He'd need to make a pretty big leap as a shooter to get there. I think VJ King has a reasonable shot. 6'7" wing. He can do some stuff. Malik Williams is kind of a wild card. Darius Perry is kind of a wild card at this stage. Anas Mahmoud has people who like him just due to the mobility and shot blocking prowess, but he got his ass kicked today. Ray Spalding has been interesting in the past. He was probably Louisville's best player today. I think I would take over 0.5, but Louisville does not have a surefire NBA player on this roster at all.
Yeah, Spalding stuck out to me the most today just because I haven't seen him a ton. He has good feet moving in space, but he kind of has to shoot threes, I think, to have NBA value. I looked at a lot of their guys like Adele, good college player like you noted, but what is this one skill moving into the league? It's just kind of tough with a lot of these guys.
Yeah, and I think Adele is an okay defender. I've never been super impressed with his ability to shut down anyone on the wing. That would be a swing skill for him as well if he could just be a versatile two-way threat. Yeah. I don't really see it though, to be honest, right now. Let's talk about Kentucky though, because Kentucky wins this game by 29 points, 90-61. They just blew them away, like I said, in the last 25 minutes. They do this with 8 points from Kevin Knox. Not even really a great game from him. He was fine, I guess, but he fouls out. He goes for 8 points in 17 minutes. He just wasn't a necessary piece for them today. The guy who was super impressive, though, was Shay Alexander. Shay Alexander goes for 24 on 19 shooting possessions, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals. Continues to just be a menace defensively with 6'6", 7-foot wingspan. Offensively, though, I think is where he showed off the most, right, Cole?
For sure. The dribble moves, he had a couple hesitation moves behind the backs, in and out dribbles, created some separation and self-creation settings, which we haven't seen a ton of. Saw some length extension finishes. I think he had at least one pull-up jumper, maybe 2, and then he had that 3 off the catch. So he showed you a lot more offensively than he has, at least from what I've seen of him this year.
Yeah, from a creative standpoint, particularly. Yes. He's been okay, kind of spotting up, but part of the reason that Quade Green has moved into the starting lineup ahead of him, and Quade had a pretty nice day as well today, but part of the reason that Quade has jumped him as a player who fits better with this starting lineup is that Quade can create a little bit better. With Shay, I mean, this was the kind of stuff that he hadn't shown as much of this year. The ability to, for instance, there's that one play where he got, I forget who it was, on skates and had like a nice hesitation move, went into a behind the back dribble and then just went up for a nice right-handed layup in the lane. And it was that kind of stuff that we hadn't seen from him as a creative ball handler yet, that showed me that, maybe he does have a little bit of equity as a lead ball handler. I'm still considering him more of a wing. He'd be a guy that I would have in the top 60 right now, but I still think he has a ways to go in terms of proving himself as a player who can create an impact offensively. But this was a great step on that way to go.
Absolutely. I think I fall on the same line with you, having him as a top 60 guy. I like the defensive ability. He's more of a combo guard, maybe at his ceiling. I'm not sure if I see him as someone who has the dynamism to run pick and roll and kind of be like that sole creator type. But he does have some secondary ball handler appeal to me. And if he can space the floor, I think he has enough skill to work with projecting forward if he develops certain parts of his game.
Yeah, the explosiveness is what worries me a little bit. Like, he looks like a guy that might be able to add some explosiveness as he continues to fill out his frame. I think what his overall NBA value is going to be very dependent on how much more athletic he gets as he continues to add some muscle mass and maybe potentially adds a little bit more explosiveness and power.
Agreed. And I think he actually has a pretty high basketball IQ. I don't think it's outstanding, but it's pretty good. Like, he knows what he's doing on the floor for the most part. We see him get into passing lanes defensively. He knows how to read the floor for the most part with the ball, make some impressive passes. So if he is able to add that explosiveness on drives and he becomes more of a threat to score, that's huge for him.
Yeah, no, 100% agreed there. Let's go on ahead and talk about Hamidou Diallo as well. I wrote about Diallo in my big wings breakdown earlier this week over at The Athletic. Go read that. I still have Diallo as a top 15 prospect. I think that I'm a little bit higher on him than the consensus is, right?
Yeah, I can't get that high. I have him probably late teens, early 20s. I get the allure. I'm not quite sold yet. I know we have probably the same concerns because everybody has the same concerns with him. How does this game translate to the half court? But his shooting improvement has been noticeable for me. Just over the last 2 years, mechanically, he's gotten a little bit more fluid in that capacity. We see him in the open court. I think if you're a high-tempo team like the Brooklyn Nets, for instance, at 27 right now with the Raptors pick, and you really have a high pace, you change ends, and you play a lot in transition, Diallo would be a really nice pick. I don't think he falls that far, but that's just the kind of system that I could see him in.
Yeah, so I think that part of this is that I just look at who I have in that range right now. Like, I would take him over Robert Williams. Would you?
I think I'd still go Robert Williams. I think I see his role player appeal. He has more established skills to me right now, even though the positional value of Diallo as a wing probably trumps kind of maybe an average starting big at his ceiling. I don't know, but I think I'd still have Williams.
Yeah, I guess that's my thing. Like, I don't know that I see Robert Williams having like some immediately translatable skills. Like, he's a good shot blocker, but outside of that, he's taken a pretty big step back this year. Like, I'm just not super convinced of that yet. And, I would probably take Bruce Brown over Diallo. I would take Wendell Carter over Diallo. I'm starting to get a little bit higher on Carter. The more I watch him, the more he's just polished in general. Like, he just seems like a guy you can fit into a role. With Diallo, it's hit or miss, right? Like, everything he does is so accentuated either positively or negatively. And the biggest place that bears itself out is in the way he gets so many of his buckets. You can make a case that Diallo is probably one of the 5 best players in this draft class in terms of generating early offense. He's so good at leaking out on the break. He's really good at creating shots like in that 3 to 10 foot range on like the break and early offense settings even. Maybe not even within the first 5 seconds out on the break, but maybe within the first 10 seconds. He's really good at just finding little clean looks that end up being efficient shots for him. You look at his transition play, he's actually generating 40% of his offense out on the break. In some respects, that's good. In some respects, it's bad because he just can't do anything in the half-court setting. That's the reason that so much of his offense is generated in transition. What percentage of his offense is generated in transition, at least? He can't attack closeouts all that consistently yet, although he did have that big dunk to open the game here at Rupp Arena against Louisville. Really, he is just kind of a spot shooter. in half-court scenarios, though, right now, and maybe like a backdoor cutter as well. That makes it tough, especially whenever he doesn't always make the best passing decisions either. He'll make these like aimless, the way I put it in my article is like he makes these aimless forays like into traffic and doesn't really know what to do once he gets there. That kind of stuff scares me, but the tools are there. Like you can kind of see the way he moves in full court settings translating to the slightly more open floor of the NBA setting because there's just more space due to the move back 3-point line, as well as the fact that Kentucky particularly struggles to space the floor.
Yeah, I think the projection in the half court is mostly centralized around his shooting ability. If you think he can shoot, that'll open up the floor for him to attack closeouts like we saw in the first play of the game or one of the first plays of the game today. I'm not really buying his handle in tighter spaces yet. Maybe he develops that, but he's a big space handler. We saw that in and out dribble he put. Yeah. But then you go back to that decision making issue where he just crashes right into the Louisville guy taking the charge when I think Quade Green was right next to him on his right. He could have just had a dump off pass. So you see that a lot this year. Like he misses drop off passes a lot because he tries to force the issue as an attacker. But the physical gifts are clear. I mean, he's really fast. He has that gliding athleticism in the open court. If you get him in the right system that you can really leverage that ability to leak out and kind of play in transition, I can see his appeal even in the late teens. I think that in the right system, he has that kind of value. It's just long-term projecting kind of a skill ball approach. It's tough. Is he going to run a secondary pick and roll right now? Probably not, no. A lot comes down to the defensive end. I mean, he's improved a lot, in my opinion, technique-wise. He's still not there. He's not even close to being there. But the first game of the season against Kansas, he looked woefully lost as far as just awareness, everything. And I think he's refined his technique enough to where I'm comfortable enough with his athleticism, saying he can potentially defend. He has that quick twitch, point of attack defense ability. That's going to be the issue, is the intersection between 3 and D, and if you can get him on the break and utilize that.
So, like, I'm just trying to look at, like, the big glut of teams between, like, you know, number two. It's really, like, between number 2 and number 13, even, just right now. That difference is 4 games, which is kind of crazy if you look at it right now. Like, I look at a team like Sacramento. If I'm Sacramento and I want to get up and down and I end up at, like, number 11, I might be okay with him. Chicago just generally needs athletic wings. I would consider him, although we're going to have to see how they continue to react once Zach LaVine gets back from injury and everything. I mean, the Clippers just generally need more wings, period, full stop. I think you can say that. I think he, you know, right now, I would just generally consider him at the end of the lottery. Like I guess, like, who would you take ahead of him in that range? Like, you might take Troy Brown ahead of him, right?
Yeah, they're really, really close for me. So that's not even a clear. That's not even a clear cut. I get where you're going with this. I think that it makes a lot of sense. You get to a certain point where it's positional demand as well. You have the athletic upside. Would you take Lonnie Walker or him?
I would take him because he's longer. He's more athletic. Walker can certainly shoot more, but you know, I think they kind of share the same, you know, issues in terms of sometimes just making these weird, forays, and really it's not weird, it's inexperienced, really, forays into traffic, and then not really having the wherewithal to hit, guys on the outside on the 3-point line, to not hit that kick out pass all the time, to not hit that wraparound pass. They have similar concerns to me, but I look at Diallo's physicality versus Walker's, and I think, you know, I don't necessarily know yet. I don't think we've seen enough of healthy Lonnie Walker, though, to get a full impression of his game.
I agree. I think I would take Walker still because I just trust his shot more. I think his mechanics translate more compactly. I just have more faith in him shooting the ball. Bruce Brown, I would take over him just because I love Bruce Brown's versatility, his defense. You would still take Kevin Knox over Diallo, right? I'm guessing.
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a clear top 11 for me right now with Doncic, Ayton, Bagley, Porter, Trae Young, Jaren Jackson, Colin Sexton, Mohamed Bamba, Kevin Knox, Mikal Bridges, Miles Bridges. Those are my top 11.
That's fair. Yeah, I think you can go a lot of different ways there, but I think my cutoff is probably more around 13, 14, but I'm with you. I think you can start considering Diallo in that range right now. Yeah,
it's just once I get past that range, I look for either guys that I really, really trust or guys who I think have a lot of upside. And with Diallo, I do think that upside still exists because of the explosiveness, because he actually does have pretty good body control in open floor settings too, you know? Like for a guy who is that explosive, sometimes those guys lack the body control. He actually does kind of, have that Euro step ability, which is kind of a weird phrase that I think I just kind of created, that I kind of like.
Yeah, there's definitely allure. I mean, he has the foundation, enough of that to where you think maybe he can develop certain skills. He's not completely, he's not hopeless as far as a ball handler or decision maker. He shows enough to maybe eventually be something as a skill ball player. But I think that takes a lot of, projection and the right system, of course, to develop these players. A lot's going to be based on where he kind of goes. I think he can be a transition player in the NBA for sure.
Yeah.
But the half-court setting, that's probably going to be contingent on his ceiling outcome being contingent on what destination he goes to.
If you're at number 18 and you get Corey Brewer, are you happy?
Yeah, that's tough.
I think I am.
Yeah, I don't think that's bad necessarily. I mean, it's not a super valuable pick if you're Corey Brewer, but there are worse picks that can be made in that range.
Like, I would bet that, Corey Brewer, I think, went number 11 or 12 or so. I would bet that Corey Brewer's career has created commensurate value with that pick, Yeah,
I mean, he plays in the Houston system where he can really get up and down. He plays well in transition. I think that's his main quality, and that's probably what you're getting at, of course, is just having that ability to leak out and kind of successfully create points in that regard.
Yeah, and have the questionable shot as well, where you're probably going to be able to take them, but you might not hit them at a super high level of efficiency. But Diallo's so young too. Who knows the way his career is going to go. The last guy I want to talk about from this game is PJ Washington. Do you have any interest in PJ Washington? Because I think the more that I watch him, the more that I do have interest.
Yeah, he flashes for sure. He'll show you a little bit of everything, but it just hasn't been consistent enough for me this year. I started out a little bit higher on him. I think I had him I want to say the top 40-ish, around that range, because he just flashed so many different skills. The mid-range jumper, I like his touch there. He shows you some explosiveness off two in space. Sometimes he'll really switch and defend well. I don't think he's great in space, but he'll flash that lateral agility. It's just the total package hasn't been consistent enough for me. What about you?
Yeah, to me, he's just very intriguing because of the flashes in the body, right? He's 6'7", 235 pounds, can move his feet, and has a 7'3" wingspan. So he's a +8 wingspan. That kind of player can be incredibly valuable if you put him in the right situation and you give him the right coaching from a defensive standpoint. And I think that under John Calipari, I think Calipari, and I've said this before on the podcast, I think he's one of the most underrated defensive coaches in the country. You look at the way that players under him have developed, it is really impressive, and you look at the way that his team's defenses have actually been incredibly successful for them being so young. I think that he doesn't get enough credit for that. If PJ Washington would stay there 2 or 3 years, or if he would, for whatever reason, decide to declare this year, and ended up going to a situation where he would get incredible defensive coaching and would learn the fundamentals of how to be an effective defender who can switch 1 through 5, that would be an incredibly valuable player to me. He just can't do it yet. You know what? He's still really, really far away, but I keep looking at him and I'm just you know what? That's a really interesting player.
Yeah, the idea of him is better than the reality right now. I think when we did the preview show before the season started, I said that maybe he was one of the small ball 5, maybe 4 backup guys in the league. If he could develop these switching skills and kind of add some skill level to that offensively, you could get away with playing him at the 4 and 5 in the NBA at a reserve unit, and he could maybe give you some offensive value there and be able to hold himself defensively. So that's kind of how I still see him, is that kind of flash player that could potentially have value down the road. He just has to really iron out specific skills. It would really help if he could shoot threes consistently, of course. Yeah. I mean, that would help his projection a ton. But if he can bring perimeter defensive value, I think he will have an avenue eventually to be an NBA player. Just really quick, Corey Brewer was a 7th overall pick in that draft.
Okay, so yeah.
Which is really interesting.
A little bit higher than I thought he went. But still, probably did not create value commensurate with the 7th overall pick, but I would guess late lottery is probably where his career would have been okay in terms of the breaking point. To kind of transition from PJ Washington to another player that actually is in the news right now, would you rather have PJ Washington or Justin Jackson?
Oh gosh, I mean, this version of Justin Jackson this year was pretty brutal.
But you don't know, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to of inform the listeners, Justin Jackson is out for the rest of the season with a torn labrum in his right shoulder, and the biggest concern for Jackson this year has been the jump shot. The fact that, I think he was right around like 28% or so whenever he was, or decided to shut it down realistically. So how much was the shoulder bothering the jump shot, and how much of a shooter is he really in compared to what he showed last season over a limited sample?
Yeah, and I trust his mechanics last year more than I trust anything Washington has shown as far as translatable skills. Maybe Jackson wasn't the 40 whatever percent shooter he was last year, translating to the next level. Maybe he was like maybe more of a mid 30s, high 30s guy, but I felt better about his shot projection. I think his athleticism, we've talked about this before, is kind of overrated. I kind of soured on him a little bit. I think I started with him in the 20s, moved him down to the second round this year, but I still feel like, to answer your question, I think I would prefer Jackson if the shoulder checks out, just because I feel better about his shot.
I think I would prefer Washington. This does not happen rarely, or this happens rarely when we disagree. So I'm going to savor it. So the reason I would take Washington is I think he does everything else better than Justin Jackson. Like, he's a way more natural passer. I think that he defends the interior more naturally. I don't know that there's much of a difference in them laterally, but I know that PJ is way more explosive vertically than Justin Jackson is. I think he's going to be a much better finisher than Justin Jackson has shown himself to be over the course of his career. And, defensively, like I said, I think that I just kind of trust his frame a little bit more than Jackson's. Like, he looks like he's more powerfully built from the lower half, whereas Jackson has like kind of a funky frame. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think that those are points that are true. I just look at Jackson still and say he has the one skill that I think could translate in a positive fashion, and that's his shot. But again, if his shoulder's messed up and that regresses, then I think Washington has more ancillary skills. It's just how much do those skills really matter if they're not refined?
Yeah, and like I have to try and figure out what I'm going to do next week with PJ Washington for my big board. Like, I think I'm going to have him in the top 50 of my board. I'm not 100% sure, though.
I think that's fair. Honestly, there's stuff to work with. It's just, like you noted already, I think it's a little bit farther down the road than just coming into the league and having a projectable skill.
Yeah. So the last thing we're going to talk about here before we let you go, this will be the last podcast also before the new year. Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic decided to go out and drop 20 points, 10 assists, and 8 rebounds against Fenerbahce over, I guess it was Thursday. We're recording this Friday, so he did it yesterday. I had just recently written about Luka Doncic, and he's just a stud. Like, there's no other way to put it. You look at the way that he impacts the game as a lead ball handler. He's just remarkably impressive. Did you have a chance to watch any of that game by chance?
Unfortunately, no. I have not got a chance to get to that. I haven't seen too much of him this year since the very beginning of the season, just because I felt like I had a pretty good read on him. But that's somebody I'm going to go back over as we progress during the season and kind of see if he's developed in any areas.
All of them, like full stop. Like he is getting better every single time he steps on the floor. And he's getting more confident every time he steps on the floor. It was funny. Jonathan Givony, great NBA draft writer over ESPN. I love the work that he does. He went over to Europe, did a 10-day trip and started with Luka Doncic over there. I forget where they were playing, if they were playing at Real Madrid or what. He goes over and Doncic gets ejected in the first half of the game that John was there for. And Givony mentions that he's starting to become more confident to the point where his on-court antics have started to showcase themselves more, where he'll get in the face of officials and bitch and moan about calls pretty regularly. I'm okay with that kind of stuff. Like, it's a natural progression in terms of his confidence to where if he is going to continue to be this good, where right now he's second in the EuroLeague in scoring, 10th in rebounding, and 10th in pass and assists. Like, that's insane for an 18-year-old. I'm fine with him doing that stuff.
I'm actually it's a positive for me.
Yeah.
I want to see
you
that.
Have that kind of motherfucker tendency.
Oh yeah. When you translate to the league, you're not, too small for the moment. He's going to be up to the task as far as playing in the NBA, having that kind of weight on his shoulders and having the confidence. I think confidence is one of the most underrated parts of young players' games. I mean, look at Jason Tatum this year. He's been killing. He's super confident. Like, those guys that can come in and just immediately impact, not necessarily even winning basketball, but just be a presence on the court. You get the whole European stereotype. Sometimes, like, they come in, it's kind of like deer in the headlights. It's like culture shifts. And if Luka has that kind of, if he has that instilled in his head where, he's a great player and that's going to translate immediately, I think that just makes his projection even cleaner, because he's not going to come in and just be scared of the moment.
Yeah, and, you look at the thing that I think gets most underrated with him is his scoring ability. Like, I know that he's second, like I said, in the EuroLeague in scoring, but every time you hear someone talk about Doncic, it's the way that he handles the ball and how he can be a 6'8" point guard. You know what I mean? Does that feel like that happens with you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, he kind of suffers from the Simmons-Lonzo comparisons, not as far as stylistically with their games, it's just that outlier kind of IQ, and he just brings other skills to the table. He's much more effective in pick and roll than Lonzo is. We've talked about this before. I mean, rarely do you have to chase over the top of 6'8", 6'9" guys who can shoot off the dribble. He has more acumen in that avenue. Like, he can score at the NBA level because he can play and pick and roll. He can make all the reads, but he can also shoot in those situations. And then he has the threat of a shot. So that delineates him and differentiates him from a guy like Simmons, who is really basically 10 feet and in. Doncic is like 30 feet and in. So I do think that is the case, that his scoring acumen gets pushed to the side because people want to be like, oh, this guy's a pass-first guy. That's what he does. He's not going to be able to score at a high level because he's not that athletic, but he's super skilled in basically every component outside of just that. The athleticism concerns with the lack of dynamic burst, the lack of 1 foot verticalness or explosiveness off of one around the basket as a finisher, but he has great touch there too and a great frame to absorb contact. So I do think his 3-level scoring kind of gets pushed aside when he has that potential dynamic off the dribble shooting.
And the one thing that I want to point out there is his footwork. I think that a big part of his scoring ability is his footwork in the way that he consistently keeps himself balanced and consistently keeps himself with his feet under him, ready to shoot basically at all times, right? You look at the way that he can operate in the pick and roll. His feet are never out of place. He knows exactly how to use like his lower half to get a defender on his back or on his hip and then figure out a way to just put up a shot. With his weight under him, getting good weight distribution throughout his lower half for his jump shot. It happens the same way whenever he's shooting from behind the 3-point line and he's pulling up. He can do like a right to left crossover, and his ball pickup is so clean, but also his feet are always under him, and it allows him to be a threat from just about any spot on the court, which creates a sense of uncertainty whenever you're defending him. You have to stay attached to him because he's such a good shooter and such a good scorer, but that's just going to open up more lanes for him as a passer. It's so hard to defend him because he's so smart. He has the size and vision to see over the defense and orchestrate everything. And then you look at the way that he can score the ball, and it's just incredible. He has incredible touch around the basket. He has incredible touch with floaters from like 16 feet. He has just good touch from behind the 3-point line. He made that like 90-foot shot a couple weeks ago against Barcelona. Like, it's, that's a lucky shot, but at the same time, to do that, you have to have incredible touch. You can't just, like, you look at the way that ball arcs and then goes in the hoop, you can't say that guy doesn't have incredible touch.
And also, I think we have to add off ball. He can really play off ball. He's a great cutter. Yep. He can come off screens and shoot. He's definitely a catch and shoot threat. So you're talking about an initiator that can also play off the ball. You just don't see high level players like that who can create for themselves and for others, but also they don't demand the ball all the time. They can operate in like a motion system and kind of leverage their off ball skill. And that's what he projects as. Like you noted, he was he's great naturally at using his body. I think that's the big thing with him is maybe he can't create separation on like raw dynamic burst, but he puts guys in jail already at 18. He's really good about using his body to create advantages, and that's kind of what he's going to have to be. But even in NBA space, I mean, he's going to have more room to operate too than like college players would. Like he's going to have the ability to get guys on his back. He's going to have basically a 1-versus-1 matchup against bigs a lot of the time in pick and roll. And he has the size to pass over the top. He can survey the entire floor, and he can also shoot over the top too. So there's just a lot more to work with than just an average athlete who's a great passer.
So right now there are 10 teams within 3 games of the number 1 overall pick.
Jeez.
And that does not include the Lakers, who, get the pick if it's number 1, right?
I think wouldn't Philadelphia, because it's conveyed regardless. So
you're right. It's unprotected.
Yeah, so it's Philadelphia 1, and then 6 through 30, and Boston 2 to 5.
Yeah, so Philadelphia. So let's say there are 11 teams essentially that will have a shot at Luka Doncic right now. Is there a fit that sticks out to you?
Oh boy. Selfishly, I kind of want him to go to Dallas just because I think that'd be a really fun dynamic. We've talked about this in the past of wanting to put him with another kind of initiator type who can get to the rim really easily. And that's the guy that sticks out is Dennis Smith in that area. But he's a fit pretty much everywhere. I mean, any system is going to be able to fit somebody like that in, and you need multiple playmakers. You can't just have, like, LeBron's the only guy I can remember that really he can be the sole playmaker, and that's okay. You need multiple guys who can create. So all these teams, I mean, Atlanta could definitely use him. Budenholzer's great with, like, usually he runs more motion type principles. This year it's more spread pick and roll just because they can't score.
Right.
Boston, that'd be a great. I mean, geez,
that'd be terrifying.
Let's not give him to Boston. They don't need him, but that'd be pretty incredible for his development.
Yeah, no, Dallas is interesting to me because you want the ball in his hands a ton, but Dennis Smith doesn't really play that well off the ball. So
yeah,
I don't know what I don't like. I love the idea of Rick Carlisle getting super creative with the way that they use Luka Doncic, and I think that would be of the teams that are up at the top of the draft, other than Boston maybe, just because they have the talent fit around them already. I think that Dallas might be my favorite, schematic fit for what Dallas likes to do. But I just don't know if I love the roster fit because I don't know if I love him with Dennis Smith necessarily. Memphis would be interesting to me, putting him next to Mike Conley because Mike Conley is so good at playing off the ball already. Orlando could just use more lead ball handling equity. Just full stop. Yep. Cleveland, who knows what's going to happen with LeBron, but Luka Doncic would be a hell of a replacement from, box score stuffing standpoint. He's obviously not LeBron, but he would be a great start to kickstart their rebuild if LeBron was to leave. Even if he stays, it's a perfect fit. Anyway,
that's my vote right there. if LeBron stays, let's put LeBron and Doncic together. That'd just be incredible.
That'd be incredible. I'm all in on that. Like Sacramento. Again, like I don't know how I feel about him and De'Aaron Fox together. Chicago, I don't know how I feel about him and Chris Dunn together, but I don't know that Chris Dunn has enough equity where that matters. Phoenix next to Devin Booker would be really fun.
Yeah, those last two were really interesting. Chicago, if you had Dunn like defend point of attack, he's actually shot pretty well off the catch on threes this year. I think he can develop like a corner 3-point shooter. So that kind of mix would be really interesting. I think Hoiberg's a pretty underrated coach. He got killed last year, but he's really just never had the personnel to do what he wants. And even this year, I mean, they've kind of exceeded expectations. They've won 9 of 11 games. They have no business doing that. So I like him in Chicago a little bit. Phoenix would be really interesting next to Devin Booker. Do they have the defensive infrastructure ultimately to make that palatable? Who knows? I mean, they're not really in a position to do that. If they get a chance to take Doncic, they should just do that.
Yeah, like you put him between, or I guess like maybe you just let Luka Doncic be the point guard with Josh Jackson and Devin Booker there. You could play like 5 guys 6'8" to 6'10", essentially, or like I guess Devin Booker's like 6'6", but whatever. Like you could play 5 guys between 6'6" and 6'10", switch everything, have a ton of ball handling ability on the floor. Both Booker and Doncic could shoot. Like that would be so much fun to me.
Or we could just give them to Philadelphia, and then Philadelphia can have the 4 best prospects from 4 respective drafts. That would be that would be insane.
I'm all in on that idea just for the sheer fun of it. And then like Philly could go out and sign a free agent too.
And Philly fans would still be pissed off because they're not meeting expectations, but that'd be incredible. I mean, Doncic in that system. I mean, they already play that supersized lineup with Saric. So I mean, you just replace Saric with Doncic, and it's like holy hell. Yeah,
I wouldn't even know how to react to that, to be honest. If I was like any defense, like I don't know how you'd really defend them.
You couldn't. Yeah. There's no, especially if they all improve in like 3-4 years. There's no way you can defend that team. Yeah,
and like the Knicks too would be great, but the Knicks are playing themselves out of that race already at like 17 and 18.
Yeah, him and Porzingis and like a pick and roll as your fulcrum. You have Ntilikina, who I don't know if you think of him as a point guard. Maybe he's a combo guard. He can obviously run pick and roll. He's been a great passer this year. Who knows how dynamic
at the point of attack too.
Exactly. Yeah, how dynamic Ntilikina is as a scorer is ultimately going to determine his upside. But that's a really interesting roster fit if the Knicks get in position. But like you know, they've been exceeding expectations, even though I think they've lost 4 straight now. So before that, they were.
You know what? Like, the more I think about that Phoenix fit, I think that is like my favorite from a fun perspective outside of Philadelphia. Like, I don't think Philadelphia is going to get that lucky. I'll just say that. But like, just from a sheer experimental perspective, being able to throw out Josh Jackson on point guards and just let him attack and say, go sick these players defensively, score when you can, but get out in transition when you can. But we just want you to expend all your energy defensively. If he's willing to do that, that'd be awesome. And just let those guys go. And then you'd have Chris and you'd have Bender and you'd have some really fun pieces, I think, there. That could play a smart brand of basketball. I think that might be my favorite, like just from a fun perspective.
My only reservation would be just, have they really developed anybody outside of, I mean, Booker's gotten better for sure, but like Bender hasn't really improved that much. Chris Jackson hasn't gotten off to the best start. I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and kill the Suns organization. There's a lot more at work than I probably know about, but that'd be my one reservation is like, if we're thinking about teams that I trust with Doncic at the top, and that's kind of what it has to be because I have to trust the team because he's just too much of a talent not to. I don't know if Phoenix would be up on that list, same with the Kings, but who knows? I mean, he's gonna thrive wherever he goes. It's just about optimizing him, I think.
I guess my theory is like, I don't know if that same front office is going to be there at the end of the year anyway.
That's also fair.
So like, I just don't know what to think of that. I have no problem killing the Phoenix organization. Like they've made weird decisions.
That's fair.
Cole, tell the people where they can find your work.
As usual, at thestepin.com, we try to have new content up every day. I'm going to write my yearly draft reflection piece where I'll go through all the stuff that I missed, which is this year a lot, and hopefully some stuff that I hit. So be on the lookout for that. Probably come out Monday.
What did you miss this year? That's a good question. Maybe we should save that for the next podcast. Just a New Year reflection on what we missed last year. Mainly Kyle Kuzma.
Yes, mainly Kyle Kuzma.
Please go subscribe to the Game Theory Podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Android, whatever podcast app you use. I think we're up there now. This will be the last podcast of 2017. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate you guys taking the time. I really appreciate you guys reaching out, giving me feedback, everything. I'm just so thankful for the listeners that we have on this show. Until next time, though, it'll be 2018, and we'll talk soon. Bye.